Now, one of the most difficult challenges I find in creating a painting is understanding exactly how to create a form and give it its character. And of all the objects that I get the most struggles with, there's two, that is rocks and trees, okay? Well, here we're going to go ahead and do the rocks, and I've done many of these studies on some of our other shows and in demonstrations and lectures around the country, but you know what? You never get enough of this, so I want you to pay real close attention, and I want you to do one, and then when we're done here today, your homework assignment is going to be to really go in and do several setups like this where you have different rocks, okay? Now the first thing we do is take a piece of charcoal. Now I don't always do this, but in this case I will. And I'm just going to go ahead and make me just the location of a small collection of rocks. And then up here in the corner, now remember, these are study canvases. These are not finished paintings, so you're just going to work on them just like little studies, and you're going to keep them handy. Because after we've done all of our studies in the next 2 or 3 sessions, then we're going to dive into a finished, complete painting, a full-size painting. So it's important that you get all these things down, okay? Now, that's kind of where I'm going to lay in my basic rocks. Again, my light source is coming in from the left. Watch how we do this. This is more exciting than anything that you'll do. Now, I'm going to stand up for this because I feel a little more comfortable doing that. And I'm going to switch to my number 6 bristle brush. Actually, this is a number 4. We'll go ahead and use it. All right. Now, down here on the palette, I'm going to take a little burnt sienna, a touch of blue, and a touch of purple. Those are your 3 earth tones, or your darker ones. And I'm going to add just a smidgen of white because I don't want it to be so dark that it's just overpowering. And I don't want it to be too one color. I had a little too much purple, so I had a little more blue and sienna. Okay, now there's a nice color. Pretty dark. Now watch what you do. Now this is going to drive most of you nuts. But the biggest problem, the greatest dilemma that we have in doing rocks is that most of us have a tendency when I paint rocks just like a photograph. And when you understand this system, now this is not a gimmick, it's really the most effective way of painting rocks. Now I know many very famous artists in this country, had the privilege, the honor of showing with them and visiting with some of them, and we all kind of share a similar thing. No matter how far you are up the ladder, we all struggle with certain things. And one of the things most of us struggle with is learning how to take a form out of a blob of paint, make a form out of a blob of paint without actually going in there and making a paint by number. See, a lot of people would take their sketch and they'll make this rock and they'll sketch everything in and they'll get all the little cracks drawn in and the shading, and then they try to paint it perfectly. Folks, if you're going to do that, you might as well be taking a photograph of it, because there's no such thing as a perfect painting. We as humans make mistakes. That's what gives the painting their character. That's what makes the paintings have that warmth and that feeling. That's why people like to look at them. That's why people like to buy them, because it was done by a human being that makes mistakes. So don't be worried about being perfect. It's impossible. Once you cross that bridge, once you understand that you can't be perfect, then your painting starts to develop. Now watch how quickly these blobs of paint turn into something really outstandingly beautiful. Now I just rinsed my brush out. I'm going to go down to my palette, and I'm back into my sunshine mixture, which is the white and the orange here. And I'm adding a little white to it. Now to that, you see it's sort of a lighter peachy color. I'm going to add a little bit of that color I just mixed up and to gray it, because we don't want it to be too white right now. So anytime you're adding the sunshine for something like the rocks here, always add a little bit of the mud that's underneath there. I call it mud. It's kind of a graying agent. So yeah, it grays it. Now let's start with this one first. And just watch kind of how quickly. Now we'll come back and refine these at some point in time, but right now let's just start. Let's see if we have enough highlight. Okay, I'm going to make it just a little bit lighter. Now I got a little too much water. I did exactly what I told you not to do, and that's another thing. I'm going to always show you my mistakes, and I just made one. I dipped my brush in the can instead of getting a little dab of water off the paper there, and it creates a little bit too much moisture, and it's harder to create your color. So don't do that. All right, let's go back up here. That's a little better. Now what I'm going to do is quickly dry brush on the shape of this while it's still a little wet. I want you to notice that you don't have to spend forever creating a rock. Now I'm going to reload quickly. And what I look for are little areas in my rock formations that have brush strokes showing, and that's where I can see a rock developing. So I'll make a quick highlight on the top like that. Watch this. Okay. Now, see, I've actually created almost 2 rock formations there. Now I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to have to mix me a little bigger pile of paint because I'm running out already. I'm going to highlight this one, and notice I'm going to go out beyond. I don't have to just hug the shape of the rock, or the dark spot. Just dry brush on a little bit of highlight. Look, there's another spot right there for a small one. Just a quick little touch. And now you've created 3 little rocks, but you're not done. You can come back now with a little bit of the dark value. Now you come back on the back side, and that's where you can add a little crack or two. You dry brush in a little bit more of the hardness of a rock. You kind of clean up the areas where you want to go back in and have, more of a rock shape. Like right there, see, is a good spot. Plus, also remember, you're going to have grasses and things coming up through here. So you're going to bounce back and forth from the light to the dark. Now notice there how I've created that basic little collection of rocks there without really spending that much time on it. We're going to bring up the highlight in a minute, but not just yet. Let's get the other ones done. So take the white, a little bit of orange, and I'll start, let's start up here on this one. I'm kind of dry brushing that. There's a nice spot to come out with a highlight. Now watch how I'm blending this in. Okay. Now I always thought that most of us as students would learn to paint good rocks because we're so hard-headed, but it doesn't work that way. So go on in there. Now, and notice how I'm just laying on the highlight very quickly, very loose, very free. Now my stomach is growling, so I know we're going to have to stop for lunch here in a minute, but we'll do that. Now notice how I'm blocking in just a light shade very quickly. I'm not spending a lot of time trying to actually make a real major rock at this point. I'm just kind of getting the dark and the light sides formed. Now I come back to the dark side. I'm going to just kind of remix because I kind of ran out of paint there. And I just sort of build me a little dark value. Now I come back and I clean up the areas where I didn't have any highlight. Now watch how I can add little cracks just by little touches. Crevices. Here's a good spot to maybe 3-dimensionalize this little one in the foreground a little bit. Oh, here's a great spot right in here to go ahead and build this shadow in here. This one. And you see, they all contrast individually against each other. Then, after you've located each of the rock formations, then you rinse your brush. You go down here and you take the white and the orange, or the white and the yellow, or the combination of the two, however you want to finish out your painting. And it will vary from painting to painting and from person to person. In this case, you'll notice I'm adding a little more of a yellowish tone, because now I want to come up here on this one or any of them I choose, and now I'm going to bring the highlight on a little stronger. So just a quick stroke, bring the color up a little bit brighter. This again is where you're changing the value by adding a little more white. You're making it a little more intense. See, I'm just touching it, and watch how quickly these rocks now begin to develop into more 3-dimensional forms and not just the basic shape anymore. And create the little cracks and crevices. A little nice bright spot there. Looks good. Come down there. See how much more rocky they're looking? You're adding another value. You're adding a little bit more interest. Here's a nice spot right there to put in a little brighter highlight on this one. And folks, this is what your homework assignment's going to be. You're going to go in now and you're going to take and make me a little collection of rocks, and maybe up in an area or two, just make one individual. And if you're struggling, sometimes just make one rock. get a good feel for it. Mix you a quick highlight color, and then a little of your shadow color, and so you can come back and add the little cracks. You can even take your finger and kind of soften. I'm going to show you all the little tricks and things. Oh, it's so much fun. And then after you get your little collection, all you got to do is take a little bit of the Hooker's green and a little burnt sienna and a little of the gray, purple there. And all I'm going to do, just for the sake of showing you kind of how these fall into line, I'll dry brush up some grass around the bases of them. You don't have to do this, because this is another thing we're going to learn later. But you could take that, you can add a little phthalo yellow green. I'm mostly doing this to sort of satisfy your curiosity of how these kind of look if they're settled down in the grass, okay? I'll show you the finished painting over here that we've used, that desert scene. And so you just kind of build your grass in underneath, and it separates the rocks, makes them look a little more settled. And before you know it, folks, you've got a beautiful little study with your rock formations, and it's really exciting. And you've learned a very important lesson, which you need if you're going to be a landscape painter. See, I'm just going to dry brush the little grasses up in front. Makes the rocks look settled down in there. I'll tell you, folks, this is a marvelous exercise